everybody. Welcome to another episode of Jukebox Zeros, home of big fat old Chungus.
Yeah, we're still big old Chungus, right?
This is the last time I'm doing.
Oh no,
I think we've run this bit into the ground.
I was gonna sing a song, but whatever.
You might as well.
All right, I forget how it goes.
Okay. Anyway, this episode is dedicated to the memory of Big Chungus, who is no longer the official spokesperson of Jukebox Zeros.
R.I.P.
Yes. R.I. possible?
Yeah, probably. How's Soft Chew Magoo doing?
As far as I can tell, he's just sort of... I mean, he doesn't smell anymore. He's just kind of off in the corner there.
Yeah, looking a little skinny.
I mean, the good thing is that he's not attracting ants anymore.
Yeah, that was a real problem. That was gross.
Yeah, I'm surprised you let him just stay in the corner for that long.
Yeah. The ants have moved on.
Was he just kind of tying the room together?
Yeah, I really like how the bones kind of bring the colors together with a little bit of white. All
right, definitely Soft Chew Magoo.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is going to be an interesting episode because I feel like so many episodes that we've done, we've been able to fall back onto just being a bunch of goofy, rabble-rousing, weirdo people.
Just having a goof.
Just making jokes.
Yeah.
And without giving too much away, this episode might be kind of tragic, you know?
Yeah, it
gets heavy. It gets heavy.
Yeah, this is going to be like kind of our HBO documentary series.
Yeah,
but
this is
in an episode form.
This is going to be. I mean, the Threaten episode was our serial episode, but this is our what's like serial except sad.
I like Making a Murderer, maybe.
That sounds like kind of the same thing, really.
Oh, yeah.
Frosted Flakes are like cereal, but sad.
Who said that?
And they bring me lots of joy, the Frosted Flakes.
Oh man! So that was one of our guests piping in. So let's just quickly roll through our segments really quick, and we can introduce
our bullshit.
Yeah, let's go through our dumb idiot stuff. Here's the apology section real quick.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, asshole. I'm sorry.
Got anything to apologize for this week?
What's with the swear words? That's very nice. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that too.
Okay. That was it though, right? You didn't have anything prepared, right?
Nope.
It's best when we do it off the cuff like this.
Yep.
And speaking of off the cuff or not at all, did you happen to catch whether it was Chicago, Whitney Houston, or Celine Dion in the lobby?
Oh, yes, I have an immediate answer. It was unmistakably Celine Dion.
Thank goodness.
It was one of her post My Heart Will Go On hits, too.
Oh, goodness.
What's that one where, it's got that chorus where it's like... Except more,
I know the song.
Except words.
Yeah, I know that one, and it's pretty good. I heard one that was kind of like... I don't remember what it was called. Anyway.
Do you legit think it's really good, or do you just have Stockholm Syndrome from the incredibly tiny playlist that your building has?
So, yeah, it's a real problem. They need to bring in some new blood, I think. Like who else would belong in such a playlist?
I mean,
if you were to put those three artists together into a like an algorithmic Spotify playlist.
Yeah, good question. What is the equivalent of another Chicago, Whitney Houston, or Celine Dion?
I don't know. I mean, they're all roughly in the same decade.
Maybe our guests have an answer.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's bring some other minds into this.
Okay, you may know them both from various projects, but they're both also frequent guest hosts on the program On the Town with Mikey D, and they're both in the band Sunken Armada. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool, and some other stuff. So say hi to Pam and Jason Layne are here.
Hi. Hello.
You say goodbye. I say hello.
Excellent.
I say
I'm glad we got that settled.
Yep.
Jason Layne, don't do it again.
Arnold Layne's long-distant fourth-generation out cousin.
Yeah.
like that.
Same spelling and everything.
I feel like you guys were just absolutely reaching for, like, when we were talking about what is a good XP for Chicago, Whitney Houston, or Celine Dion.
So I was very, very excited because as you were talking about that, I was thinking about our beautiful drive here to your exclusive studio. And we were listening to, and can I out us here, Jay?
Yeah.
Is this all right? All right.
I have nothing to hide in
We
life.
we were listening to and singing along at the top of our lungs. One of us was on key. It was not me. To Phil Collins.
You were doing all right.
Hey, I like Phil Collins.
Yeah.
What song?
Phil Collins is fine.
So my top three are probably the three that we listen to. We listen to In the Air Tonight.
Yeah.
We listen to Sussudio, and we listen to Take Me Home. It was so good
Oh, that's a great one.
because I don't remember.
But we listened to the homeless song first.
The homeless song made me cry. I wasn't going to touch on
You know
that.
which one I'm
I got a
talking
little
Is that the
teary.
roof is leaking?
No, it's the one where like
It's another day for you and me
Another day
in
for you
paradise,
in
but not for that lady
paradise.
who has bunions and is having some.
Oh, is that the one that
difficulties.
came out in like the early 90s or something?
1989,
Or,
and it
or
featured
89. Same thing.
It featured one David Crosby
30
from
years
Crosby,
ago.
Stills, Nash and Young.
And
Oh, that's
wasn't
right.
Nash on there too? Gnashing his teeth.
Nash must have been on there too, but he has that whiny. I don't think he was because you can, you know, like
that Nashy goodness.
yeah,
Gnashing it up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, Phil Collins, he's no Ray Wilson. I'm just going to throw
I'm
that
sure
out
we
there.
can all agree on that. No Ray Wilson there.
Yeah.
he kind of looks like he's a like 80s movie, British 80s movie, like bank robber or something.
well, but he was. He played that in the Great Train Robbery.
Was he? I
Yeah,
didn't even
yeah.
realize. He looks like an East.
Oh, it was fantastic. If you have not seen this
he's
film,
like an East Side kind of.
He does look
dude.
like
Yeah.
a grown-up artful dodger, doesn't
Yeah.
he?
He's like, hello, love.
yes.
Like a character who'd be played by Pete Tosselthwaite.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
absolutely.
He calls people like Gov.
him.
You know, what could I do for you, Gov?
He's kind of that guy. I made the mistake of telling a girl I was in 6th grade with that I thought that she looked like Phil Collins, which I thought was a huge compliment because I had not yet.
He looked like a 4'11" bald man in his 40s.
I mean, you know, we were 11. I thought it was a huge compliment because I hadn't really separated the fact that you know, being Phil Collins and looking like Phil Collins are two very different things.
Yes.
You look like someone could make a creepy British puppet out of you.
Hello, love.
So Kristen, this many years later, I'm still sorry. I
Where's
said
the
that to you.
nearest chippy? I'm starving.
Is that where they serve the chips, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
chips
A
and
chippery.
fish
And
and
fish, presumably.
had a
proper
chippery.
chippy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What is
mushy
it, a prop?
peas.
Pam's like, we need to get you. We went to London for the first time. She's like, we got to
Oh,
get you
wow.
to a proper chippy.
Yeah,
And I'm like, what did you just say to me?
yeah. So we went to Poppy's.
Like I'm from Jersey. I'm like, what did you just call me?
Yeah,
Well, you heard
What
it
you
here
doing?
first, folks.
Yeah.
Go on down. What's the name of the chippy?
It was Poppy's Fish
oh
and
Poppy's.
Chips.
Is this like other
Poppy's.
podcasts
Hi,
where like
Poppy.
next week they're gonna send
Hi,
you like a big
Poppy.
shipment? Of like, but it would have come on like a slow boat, so it'll arrive in like a month and a half, and it'll be like old fried fish.
I'm going to open up one that's called I Poppy Fish and Chip and Taqueria.
I like it.
It'll be like a fish and chip place, except it'll be laid out like an Apple store.
Sort of.
There's just no tables anywhere, and just people milling around all over the place.
People in like weird blue shirts being like, can I help you with a burrito or a fish and chip?
I like that, and like little rectangular dishes.
And
that
they
you're,
have a
like, eating
genius
from.
bar, except it's an actual bar.
Here we go, guys.
This
It's
so
it's
much.
like hot pot, but you give everyone a pot of frying grease in front
Yeah.
of them. They
Oh,
can just
wow.
do their
And
own
then
chips.
People
It's-
like
it's
just
a-
burn
whatever they want.
themselves. They melt their skin.
Incredibly amazing that you trust people with hot burning oil that much, Pat.
I mean, they have to sign a disclosure agreement when they come in.
Disclosure, not like not a waiver, a disclosure agreement.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
They're
that
not to
they're going to-
reveal the
Don't tell
details
them-
of this
Don't tell
restaurant.
anyone about the fish.
They'll disclose themselves, so they're not wearing anything flammable.
Oh God!
That's how that will
I'm
work.
having trouble with my cybergenic Layne here.
So, can I just say that? I
It's
don't
my
want to
big
give
water
anything
bottle.
away because
Sorry.
it hasn't been introduced as of yet. But I'm really enjoying how surreal and how English our conversation is already.
Oh, yeah, that'll-
Making me
It's like
super
every
happy.
conversation
Very,
we
very
have at home.
Oh, that's right.
I'm a big
Sorry.
fan of British
Yeah.
surrealist humor. Absolutely.
That kind of felt like a segue. So you think I should just get into introducing the album we're going to be talking about?
Tried to do it with Arnold Layne earlier too. Yeah, just kidding.
We're dropping hints here and there for sure.
Right.
Bang.
Sprinkles.
So you don't even need to have heard a single progressive rock song in your life to have heard of Pink Floyd. easily one of the most successful prog rock bands of all time and one of the best-selling as well. Having sold over 250 million records worldwide as of 2013, my bad. Maybe that much then.
Time flies.
Albums like Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall, which are now considered staples of the classic era of rock music. The classic quartet lineup of Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason are widely influential figures in their own right, while Pink Floyd the band has been named one of the 100 greatest artists of all time and have been a prime influence for acts like Radiohead, Kraftwerk, Nine Inch Nails, and the Smashing Pumpkins, just to name a few. Now, Pink Floyd originally formed in 1965, but their most famous lineup wasn't solidified until 1968. Prior then, the band was a quartet consisting of Roger Waters on bass and vocals, Richard Wright on keys and vocals, Nick Mason on drums, and on lead guitar and vocals was Cambridge-born Roger Keith Barrett, or as he would come to be known by his stage name, Syd Barrett.
Wow, from Cambridge, Mass, huh? That's crazy. Local boy.
dude.
Pat.
Went to Cambridge Latin with Patrick Ewing.
Pat. You can't see it. I'm finger wagging him. This is
It's
really...
Pat.
It's a
local boy,
finger
dude.
wagging.
He's from Boston, dude.
Go and get some beers, dude.
Yeah, regular Mark Wahlberg,
Fucking
dude.
beers.
Tip O'Neill was his hero.
Oh, God.
So, a frequent LSD user, it was Syd who pushed Pink Floyd, who had previously only been a rhythm and blues cover band, towards a more experimental and psychedelic sound, which really made them stand out on their studio debut, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which was a critical and commercial success in 1967, and is to this day considered a pivotal prototype to progressive rock's development. As Pink Floyd's success grew, however, Syd Barrett's behavior became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. Whether as the result of his psychedelic drug use or an undiagnosed case of schizophrenia or something else is unknown. But the formerly extroverted Barrett grew depressed, withdrawn, bewildered, and frequently catatonic. He began to miss shows and exhibited irrational and strange behavior at the shows he did make it to. So in the winter of 1967, the band arranged for their then friend David Gilmour to fill in on guitar and vocals. The intention being for Barrett to fill in a Brian Wilson-like role as a non-touring, non-performing songwriter. This very quickly became impractical, and Gilmour ended up taking Barrett's spot entirely. In April of 1968, the rest of Pink Floyd announced that Barrett was no longer in the band, which terminated their contract with their management, Black Hill Enterprises. The firm retained Barrett, however, considering him the brains of the group. Plans were immediately made by the band's former managers to record a solo album in the belief that Barrett would surpass his former bandmates with the right backing. Numerous tumultuous sessions across several months would result in the 1970 album The Madcap Laughs, which was released to minimal commercial success, critical confusion, and many an infamous story to follow. And now we're going to listen to it, and we're almost certainly going to talk about this all too infamous and confusing footnote in rock and roll history in the process.
And we're going to smell it, too. It's going to be great. Gonna
Yes.
get all
That's prime
visceral
audio,
with it.
prime audio content using your sense of smell.
I love that. That's appropriately surreal. So this is one of my favorite albums.
Right. I mean,
Super
Yeah, it's
excited.
definitely a good reason to have you aboard then. You're going to have a very subjective viewpoint on it.
Very subjective.
I remember when we
viewpoint.
were talking about having you on, we couldn't decide at first until you saw, like, right at the bottom, Syd Barrett, The Madcap Laughs, and you just jumped on it
Very
immediately.
excited. Yes. Yeah.
Like a cute little puppy
even
at the
though-
store. You
Even
said,
though,
that's the one.
even though in retrospect, I'm not really sure if you could consider this like a candidate for worst album of all time status, but it almost certainly has, stories surrounding it that we can talk about.
It's infamous, and I think that falls under our window for sure.
Yeah, that's
Infamous
true.
and confusing, and particularly in the context of, I came to love Pink Floyd in sort of a sideways route, in that I got into Pink Floyd via Syd Barrett's solo stuff, which I think is a little
That's definitely
a little
unconventional.
Yeah, usually it's the other way around.
So it's understandable that for folks who were really into Pink Floyd and expecting something along those lines from Syd, that this was a bizarre direction to take things in, and certainly his life took a strange and then very sad side trip from which he never really returned.
Yeah.
Which fascinated me as a teenager. This whole idea of, especially and let me know if I'm rambling too much.
No,
but
go for it.
I'm super excited.
No, I actually don't have a ton of things to say, and man, I'm only seeing like 2 or 3 pages of note from Lils, which is very odd for them.
Yeah, if I'm interrupting you, Lils, then please.
And
please,
I'm just going to chime in here. And I love how you nodded to me and lifted your hand. You're like, and bizarre. You were talking about bizarreness, and you like nodded and lifted your hand to me. So I guess I'm bizarre. Is that what you're saying?
I think I was actually looking at
Guys,
that
don't fight.
tapestry.
the tapestry.
Please don't fight. Oh yeah, the tapestry is very bizarre.
I was saying, hello, Mr. Peacock. I'm inviting you into this conversation.
One of those peacocks is named Frank. I forget which one. It's only one of them in particular.
Right there.
I think it is actually. I think it is that one.
Yeah,
It's the one that looks extra judgmental.
The first,
Yeah.
the first
Yeah,
few
I'm
times
right
we
there
were
with you.
the first few times we were recording in the smell cave, it took me like multiple times to come in and not just have a horrible seizure and start foaming at the mouth for just how crazy that tapestry is.
It is. I enjoy it, and I feel like I would completely believe it if you'd told me that you set this up specifically for this conversation. But yeah, Syd Barrett appealed to me. As a teenager, I was completely straight edge and very fascinated by the whole concept of acid casualties. And I'm using air quotes for people out there in podcast land. But especially fascinated by Syd Barrett and Rocky Erickson also.
Right,
Yeah.
you mentioned that
Not
when we were
about-
last talking.
Yeah, when I sort of opened my mouth and soliloquy about Syd, so I'll try not to do that today or
Oh,
tonight or this morning.
there'll be plenty of time for soliloquizing about Syd Barrett.
But yes, that was my introduction to Pink Floyd was via Syd through
very-
a side door, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting entry into a group. But yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it on the essay that Syd was essentially the brains or sort of the catalyst for them experimenting beyond the blues rock realm.
Yeah,
and
he
sort of
was
going
at the
into acid
beginning,
psych
and
rock.
their management, Black Hill, basically believed we'd like get rid of the rest of the band, but let's keep Syd on board because he's the magic fingers.
Right.
And then everything went a little bit off the rails. We'll just say that much. So what do you say we start digging into the album a little bit?
All right, let's dig in. Get your
Yeah.
spoons.
So I'll just parse this real quick by saying I don't have a lot of notes about the tracks themselves so much as the stories around the album. So we'll probably be so it won't be like, I at least probably won't be digging very critically into the songs themselves so much as focusing on the backstory around them.
That's fair.
All right. So let's open it up with track number 1, this one titled Terrapin.
I fly above you, yes I do. Well, oh baby, my hair's on end about you.
So anyone who is familiar with the psychedelic-heavy space rock sound of 60s Pink Floyd would probably at the time be very surprised to hear what the supposed genius of the band was doing now. I mean, this is sparse, very alienated, deeply self-conscious, and kind of eerily beautiful and romantic. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what else can be said about a track like this. It's just so wildly different from all the space freakouts from Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Very different, and again, I'm going to be bouncing all over this room like a Labrador Retriever puppy. So
We encourage it.
Oh yeah,
Don't knock anything
great.
over.
It's great to have someone come in who's prepared and has notes. So hear that, Jonathan Sassor? Hear that?
Patrick S. Barry.
Well, I'm complete.
I'm not saying you're bad guests. I'm saying you should be better guests. I'm just kidding, of course. We love you, John Sassor.
Come on the show sometime. Again.
I'm completely green to this record. Like I listened to it twice in my whole life, and I was introduced to Pink Floyd by Comfortably Numb. So
yeah, which I think is
how
another
most people
weird
came introduction to Pink Floyd in a way. It's like that '80s Pink Floyd thing. So
Yeah, catching
hopefully-
it from the later end.
yeah,
instead.
exactly. So they'll be
I mean, that's
Stuff
true,
they
but
had
it's also like one of their most highly recognized tunes
understood.
too. So
Yeah, but
you'd figure it'd be that one or one of like a handful of other ones.
right.
So the route that I took to Syd Barrett was really via actually also from Cambridge, England, the UK. Cambridge, Robin Hitchcock, who's a singer-songwriter. He was in a kind of folk psychedelia band called the Soft Boys in the 70s, and then went on to form the Egyptians, who were his backing band. He mostly performs solo these days.
I have two Soft Boys. They're orange.
Great. It's great right there.
Only two?
Only two right now. The third one's a girl.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They're very fuzzy. But he was very influenced by Syd Barrett, and I was a voracious reader of all interviews of my favorite singer-songwriters when I was young. Slightly less so now because, knowing too much about your heroes is slightly dangerous.
Yeah.
Especially
it was so much better when those things were a mystery and they were murky and vague, and now we have like hard evidence.
Evidence that's precisely the word.
I wish I'd never learned what Jimmy Page did with a shark.
Oh yeah, so many Jimmy Page stories. I wish I had
Jimmy
heard.
Page stories. I just don't.
Yeah,
things were fishy.
But the
David Bowie stories.
Yeah.
Too?
Oh dear.
Well, we'll circle back around to David Bowie as we talk about Syd.
Well, that track reminded me of like a David Bowie type.
So I
of thing.
appreciate you saying that. So
and that's what I can add to this conversation, being green.
I like it, Mr. Green. I'm just going to call you Mr. Green Jeans.
I'm also green to this record, so I'm going into this with a pretty objective angle.
Mr. Green in the smell cave with the Poland Spring bottle.
I was waiting for the Clue reference. That's good stuff.
Had to get that out of the way.
I like it in the smell cave. So Robin Hitchcock has an album that came out in 1989 called I, and it's just him and his guitar, and it has this kind of sparse, solitary sound to it, and that was sort of my entryway. I read an interview. He was talking about Syd Barrett's songwriting, and I went back and I listened to Syd's solo albums before he sort of fell off the end of the earth. Sort of semi-literally, I guess, and was really drawn to that solitary and quite beautiful kind of romantic tinged sound. The other thing that I'm struck by in this opening song is that I really feel like it's his first solo album. It's kind of a rebirth for him, and almost cycles back to his first musical instrument was a ukulele.
Oh, okay.
And there's an English singer-songwriter from the 1930s. He did a lot of music hall, which was kind of the British cousin to vaudeville, called George Formby. And
yes, I love George.
And he played with a ukulele, and he played these kind of comic.
Why don't women like me?
Bum, bum. But that kind of there's a little bit
with the women
of like a slowed down.
Literally.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, these are all lyrics. These are all
Milady.
lyrics. Yeah. With cauliflower ears.
Had that like Charleston type of thing too. Yeah.
But I hear that influence through this album, and I can't help but think, it's really him stripped down, brought back, not literally to his first instrument, but I sort of feel like to some of his first influences, which from my ear, I feel like would have been like the George Formby, the Lonnie Donegan, who also influenced the Beatles, which was very stripped down, very
Skiffle.
acoustic, the skiffle sound, slightly
Skiffle
comic, but really romantic songs that are geared around love and heartbreak.
Jumping off of that, like very distinctly, British sort of thing that you brought up in my research. I guess a lot of people consider Syd Barrett one of the first like contemporary rock singers to sing in a distinct and overt British accent as well.
Yep. There's the David Bowie
Wow.
connection.
I was going to say, so he did influence that because he sounds like fucking Bowie.
Because I mean, up to
album.
that point, like British singers were all pretty much just imitating, like all the rock and roll singers.
Oh, so
from
we
America.
can blame him for fucking Britpop.
Actually, we could say that Paul McCartney did and some of the quirkier songs
But
in a way.
that still
Lennon
would have been
a little
later,
bit,
though.
too.
That would have
Wait,
been
hang on.
in the 70s, I think.
Are you saying Paul McCartney was there too?
Paul was there too. Paul, no, that was dead. People saying I died. Paul died.
Ooh.
I mean, maybe the Paul that came back after '68. You know, after he died, the new
yeah.
Paul maybe was the one with the regional accent. But that was my.
I cannot stand Paul McCartney.
I'm gonna do a song with Linkin Park and Jay-Z. Why doesn't anyone like me anymore? Oh.
Probably because you're dipshit. Are we
Hot take.
cursing on this? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, feel
totally.
free.
Okay,
But
good.
We're on the internet.
Good.
that was one
No,
thing.
I was just kidding anyway.
My late mother was from North London, and she said, I mean, she'd never heard Syd Barrett before, but she identified David Bowie as the first person she heard who sang with an English accent. She said everything in popular music up until then, you know, artists like the Beatles, really,
Herman's Hermits.
Herman's Hermits, kind of.
I just had to go
but
there.
like the Rolling Stones, Cliff Richard, it had this kind of Americanized twang.
Yeah, it was
so
like a twang. It was like blues twang, you know? Yeah.
It's funny you mention that. Jumping back into Terrapin real quick. Terrapin was one of several tracks that Syd Barrett recorded for producer Malcolm Jones, which along with future Barrett tracks Maisie and Bob Dylan Blues was heavily inspired by an early interest in blues music. It's one of Barrett's better-known songs and has also been covered by the Smashing Pumpkins, Mark and the Mambas, and even David Gilmour, his Pink Floyd replacement.
Can I say some stuff about this song?
Yeah, go for it.
I liked it.
Yeah,
No,
I did too.
I'm going into this blind. I had never listened
You
to
didn't
this
even-
record before. And
You listened to like the thing prior to recording though, right?
yeah, oh yeah, no, I totally.
you're not
I'm just
filling me
listening. I'm
You're not
giving
filling
you.
me with a lot of confidence right now.
No. I did. I absolutely. I listened to the whole thing all the way through. I'm not just basing my opinions off of a 30-second
Pat, stop
clip.
winking.
No, I totally agree with you. It's very sparse and beautiful and like not quite like kind of phases in and out of time and feels very much like a demo, but like it totally works in whatever this final product was. I really liked it.
Yeah. So let's move on to track number 2 real quick. Track number 2 is titled No Good Trying.
It's no good trying to hold your love where I can't see, because I understand that you're different from me. Yes, I can tell.
So it's a very messy and unhinged rock song, and like in my notes I have it as probably by design, but knowing what I know about the album, I'm not even sure if that's the case. Like, it's a song where the tone and structure, right on down to the lyrics, Barrett just seems to be reveling in his own fragile mental state.
Absolutely.
Particularly in the repeated verse mantra, I understand that you're different from me. Yes, I can tell you you can't be what you pretend. As though Syd realizes his struggle with his mental faculties and just kind of resigns himself to that. Like he'll never truly be understood by anyone. And that's kind of sad.
It's very sad. I mean, the whole story of Syd. There are some stories. I don't know how much you can believe some of the stories that have been told. Obviously, the people who were there were in altered states. But, for example, there are stories about Syd living in a big house with a bunch of other people. It was at a time where people were dosing each other with LSD, so you would know that you'd taken LSD, and then someone might put more LSD into the tea you were drinking or into the food you were eating, and so you might wind up on 4 times the dose that you thought you were. There were stories of his housemates locking him into a cupboard, essentially, and him trying to get out and
Jeez.
being on multiple doses of
I
acid.
didn't read
And-
about that.
yeah, again, these were like stories as a 16-year-old. I was like, wow, people can be terrible to each other. I want to read more.
Boys will be boys, like.
Yeah.
4 doses of acid and lock in a cupboard. Boys will be
60s.
boys.
It was the 60s. Consent hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So most of the tracks on this album are just Syd alone backed up by a guitar. This is one of the rare songs on it that features a whole band. Because the Madcap Laughs is notable for featuring a real murderer's row of 60s prog rock musicians, including Robert Wyatt, Hugh Hopper, and Mike Radledge of The Soft Machine, Jerry Shirley of Humble Pie, Willie Wilson of Joker's Wild, and funnily enough, David Gilmour, his Pink Floyd replacement, popping up on a lot of stuff and actually taking a very big role, as we'll cover a little later in the episode.
Yeah. It's like making buddies with your ex.
Exactly.
So let's talk for a sec. Actually, before we get into that, just from this track alone, you can really hear all kinds of like the future influence that was going on from both the very lo-fi production and the messy and unpolished arrangements and song structure. Like, this album had to have been a huge influence on so many indie darlings, like, I don't know, like Guided by Voices
Exactly.
or Neutral Milk Hotel or Liars or something like that.
I would see even more literally with like this sort of more recent trend of lo-fi psychedelia. It is could kind of be along this lines as
Tame
well.
Impala.
Yeah, like
Ariel Pink.
Yeah, Ariel Pink, or even
Unknown
like
Mortal Orchestra.
oh yes, definitely like UMO, or even like I could kind of hear the sort of like pushed back, like really super compressed, dry drums on something like UMO, or even like a little bit of King Gizzard or something like that on their more like psychedelic stuff.
Right. So, the road to recording the Madcap Laughs was a very tremulous one full of distress, which of course began with Syd Barrett's Expulsion from Pink Floyd. Prior to the arrival of David Gilmour, who was brought in to cover for Barrett, not to replace him, attempts had been made to get Barrett to seek psychiatric help to little success, all the while engaging in more and more unhinged behavior, which made its way into Pink Floyd's live shows, which the audience enjoyed as a spectacle, but Waters Machen and Wright found it frustrating and distasteful. With the addition of Gilmour, Pink Floyd would perform while Barrett would wander aimlessly around the stage, deciding to join in and perform every now and then. That is, when he bothered to show up at all. These antics tended to take a massive drag on the band, who very gradually began to shut Syd Barrett out of their creative process. In their memoir, Saucerful of Secrets, The Pink Floyd Odyssey, Gilmour recalled a story of the band driving from London to Southampton to a gig. One member asked, "Shall we pick Syd up?" to be met with the response, "Let's not bother."
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very nice.
Well, I mean, they couldn't have known.
Why don't they try getting locked into a cabinet with 4 hits of acid?
But it's also it's difficult. I'm reminded of and granted, as Jay will tell you, I can drag any conversation kicking and screaming back to The Cure. But it reminds
kinda
me.
like-
Oy vey, as they say.
Sounds kind of like our friend Chris.
Yeah.
But when Lal Tolhurst, when his drug addiction and alcoholism got to the point where he really was more of a liability than a participating member of the band,
yeah.
they wound up kicking him out as well. And it's I
Did he-
understand from them.
Did he
it's a
also
heartbreaking
have
thing.
Did he also have mental health issues? Because I know that he was very he was very addicted to alcohol above all else.
Yes. As I understand it, there weren't underlying psychiatric issues. But that said, given the fact that he got sober and clean in the early 90s, this would have been a time period where it's very possible that he could have gotten sober at a time when he was simultaneously seeking psychiatric care. I know that he's now sober and clean and having a very happy, lovely life as a photographer and musician. Syd Barrett, and I think a piece of that, at least a big piece of that, if not the entirety of his experience, is because this happened in the late 60s, but he really kind of spun out. I think he was briefly, I might be wrong, but I think he was briefly institutionalized. He spent some time living with his mother and just lost that connection to his artistic side.
Yeah,
Right. He like moved back in with his mom and basically just, I remember reading the Wikipedia article on his life. It kind of just says he does that, and then it's like for the rest of his life he was here, and it's it's a time period of like 30 years.
Yeah. And I mean, like, psychiatric care in the 1960s at that point pretty much just consisted of like the doctor gives you a smack in the face and says, "Stop being weird."
Yeah, we've come a very long way for sure. And yeah, it's tough. It's really shitty having to be in that scenario where you need to fire a band member for something like that, or just having to view them as a liability. It kind of, when you're in a band when you're with your mates, you want it to be it's a very intimate experience, and it's very much comparable to like a relationship, a romantic relationship. And then at that point, it's the point where becomes a business and something much colder.
Again, society as a whole didn't have the tools to deal with mental health issues at the
Absolutely,
time.
right.
And they were still experimenting with a highly volatile substance.
Yeah. Right.
That they didn't know. You know, it's like when a drug is introduced, like a mental health drug, and people start having like symptoms 20, 30 years down the road. They didn't know what the long term.
And LSD in general was so new. It was such a new trend.
How long did it take, the medical industry to basically decide lobotomies don't work anymore?
Yeah. Too long.
100 years.
Yeah.
Christ, I think you can still find some doctors nowadays that would be cool with that.
Ugh. So let's move on to the next track, and we'll actually touch on Syd Barrett's firing, after we've sort of covered this next track real quick. Here's track number 3, this one titled Love You.
Honey, love you, honey, little honey, funny, sunny morning, love you more funny, love in the skyline, baby. Ice cream, excuse me, I seen you looking good the other evening. Oh, you dig it, had to smile just an hour or so. Are we in love like I think we be?
So this is an early contender for my favorite. It's charming, it's shuffling, little romp, sort of complete with tack piano and proto-Beck free associative lyrics, but sung in a way that's very sweet and carefree, if cryptic. And like you were saying earlier, I can hear all kinds of music hall kind of.
It's very hunky-dory
me too.
era Bowie too.
Yeah.
Has
a
that
little bit.
It's all about digging into your past to be in a comfortable place.
That's very true. I've heard that a lot about Syd Barrett, that he's very much influenced by nursery rhyme and sort of getting in touch with that earlier part of himself for inspiration.
That sort of whimsy.
Yeah, that whimsy and the true freedom of childhood and before we let adulthood take over us.
Right.
I feel like a lot of British musicians have that kind of sense, because it's such a nationalistic kind of pop thing. BBC is a very nationalistic broadcasting association, so everyone knows the same thing. There's not a lot of variety.
Cultural identity.
Right. And I don't know, it might have been because of the post-war era, everybody banded together, but it was just that kind of collaborative thing, and everybody had similar.
I kind of like that. I like you saying that.
I love that.
Immediately after Pat talking about going back to this childlike place, because I can't help thinking about the British people will talk about the nanny state and how the government because of the nanny state I can't connect my own gas. These sorts of things.
Yeah. Right.
And if you think of your government as being like a nanny, then you think of yourself and all of your compatriots as being in a nursery. Yeah. It's I don't know. There's something.
They're being mean.
Like the signs in London, and it's no anti-social.
Oh, I saw those in Ireland too.
I don't like it. The government took all me Dunkaroos.
That would be terrible. I would riot in the streets.
They closed my favorite chippy.
They took away my Branston pickle.
Oh, yikes.
Fisticuffs.
Is there a different spelling of Dunkaroos in UK? Or do they have a chiefly British equivalent?
I don't know, but I know in French they spell it with a UX.
Oh, absolutely. Dunkaroo.
That's so cute.
Dunkaroo.
Oh, I am now preparing a fine Dunkaroo.
Instead of
that was a little bit of Austrian.
Yeah, it's provincial.
Ours is better. Instead of frosting, it's pate.
That's so nasty.
Oh,
yet
gross.
intriguing.
Sticky toffee pudding.
So you're just going to take cookies or biscuits
right?
and dipping them in
Pate.
dipping them in pate.
Maybe if it was actual biscuits. American biscuits.
Yeah, okay. Or scones or crumpets or what have you.
They were scones.
So we were talking earlier about, Syd Barrett was already kind of on the outs with the band for a very long time. The final straw for them came during a rehearsal where Barrett presented a new song that he had titled Have You Got It Yet?, which was designed to be unplayable as a joke, which nobody picked up on except for Syd Barrett. Every time the band thought that they had learned Barrett's arrangements and song structure, he would abruptly change them without telling them, throwing their practice into disarray, only for Barrett to sing the chorus, "Have You Got It Yet?" slyly, and start over with a completely different set of arrangements.
I love it. I fucking love it.
That's a genius thing.
Like, seriously, though, I kind of fucking, I really enjoy that sentiment right there of just, like, it's cheerful mischiefness.
Yeah.
Mischief.
Yeah, unfortunately, the rest of the band didn't see it the same way. Once the rest of the group realized that Barrett was basically trolling them, they decided they had enough. In an interview with the documentary The Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett Story, Waters said that he put his bass guitar down, left the room, and never played with Barrett ever again, but begrudgingly called Have You Got It Yet a real act of mad genius.
Damn straight.
Then came on April 6th of 1968, the rest of Pink Floyd announced that Syd Barrett was no longer in the group.
Damn.
Yeah.
Roger Waters is
He
is
sure
a tough
is.
nut. He's brutal. I mean, I remember live at Pompeii watching like the behind the scenes stuff for Dark Side of the Moon.
I feel like you wanted
he's a
really
militant
hard to
band
call him a
member.
dick, but you were just trying to be polite.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I called Paul McCartney a dipshit, so I'll add
I
him
have
to
a
the
lot of
list.
respect for Roger Waters. I don't know. I think, back in the day, I was definitely, I was one of those kids who, you set it up like Beatles versus Stones, Blur versus Oasis, and
Pink Floyd versus
Syd versus the rest of the band, Lawrence Tolhurst versus The Cure.
Yes versus Supertramp.
38 Special versus Aha?
I'm definitely going with 38
This is getting
Special.
weird, guys.
We got a bracket going.
No, stick with... No,
March Madness.
No,
I'm
stick with
enjoying
March
it.
Madness.
we should do that. Stick with
actually.
me. It gets so much better. Red Rider versus ABC. Okay.
Oh, God. Red Rider, like fucking Tom Cochran. Yeah, the Lunatic
Fringe,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was Tom Cochran.
Man, but seriously though, that would be amazing if you had like a bracket tournament. with, like,
Didn't someone in
64
our Slack
different
chat
matches.
share
Yeah,
like a bracket?
John Sassor's wife's like elementary school had this like March Madness bracket, and it's like Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin.
How do they know
Queen.
all those bands? They're in elementary school.
I know, right?
They can't all have cool parents.
To put it into perspective, my mother used to quiz me on guitar players, like who's playing guitar on this track, and it would be like Q104 in New York, and be like,
That's what happens
Jeff
when your
Beck,
parents are
Mom.
flower children.
Yeah.
That's right.
I dig it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I had a little bit of animosity toward the rest of Pink Floyd, which sort of put me off getting into Pink Floyd at first because I was like, poor Syd, and sort of symbolically, like in my mind, like cradling him, protecting him from the rest of the band. But I don't know. I like him being a hard ass. I like Roger Waters being a hard ass.
Yeah. Because now he doesn't talk to Dave Gilmour anymore either.
He's a big
Essentially.
grumpapus.
Yeah.
He just sits on top of a
Old
hill.
sourpuss
He's the fool on the
Waters.
hill.
Oh, Sourpuss Waters. Yeah.
So let's keep things rolling.
Yeah, there we go. It's all
Let's get
beginning.
all
things
heated
rolling,
up
shall
now.
we move on to track number 4, this
Yes.
one titled No Man's Land.
You would hold your head out high. You even try. You would hold another hand. Oh, understand.
You couldn't see it, but like while we were playing that, Pam was doing kind of a Kate Bush sway dance while Jason was kind of doing air sitar.
Guided by voices. I'm telling you, they're like I think they're the most influenced by Syd
Yeah,
Barrett's.
I was
Sonically.
about to say early noise pop.
Sonically.
That's
Something
the
about
vibe.
this track sounded like it was like recorded years ahead of time. Like, I don't know if it was like the tone of the distortion or what.
Yeah, they we're putting a time machine to
Yeah.
1987, and then we're in Robert.
I mean, maybe that
garage.
cupboard was actually a time machine. Maybe. But also, I was thinking of Graham Coxon from Blur. His solo stuff, but also when he first started coming, where they started giving him like one song an album, and it's like, where did that come from? Early, like Syd Barrett.
Actually, like, it's funny you mentioned Blur, because since you put that in my head, now I'm just immediately picturing, like, No Distance Left to Run. Like, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, there's, like a connection between these two. But, yeah, I mean, more than anything, I just get a very early noise pop vibe from it. It's really discordant and chaotic, but also strangely compelling.
Yeah, I really like this track. Like just the whole tone and like it felt like very. It definitely felt a little like ahead of its time in terms of some of the timbres of like the guitar. I don't know if the version I listened to is remastered or something like that, but like just the way everything sounded was very like fresh and natural sounding.
It's really bizarre to me that at least 3 dozen bands exist because Syd Barrett was thrown into a cabinet on 4 hits of acid. Seriously, like if you think about that, like that's the truth.
What makes this song especially wild is you consider like it feels pretty well put together, but then you learn like Syd Barrett's backing band had almost no direction whatsoever from Syd Barrett, and they were mostly just trying to keep up with him. And this came out. It's a mess, but it's like a compelling mess. Yeah. You know? It's
a groundbreaking mess.
Just makes it that much more intriguing.
Yeah, it didn't even really sound all that messy to me. I don't know. Maybe I didn't really I didn't really read much into the story. I kind of wanted to keep it objective as possible, and it just felt like this was what felt like a very prescient psychedelic rock track.
A cool driving beat, too.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, yeah.
So jumping back to a previous point I made, this was another track that he recorded with Malcolm Jones, who at the time was the head of EMI's newly formed prog rock label, Harvest, which is still active to this day and is notably the home of experimental hip-hop crazy people Death Grips.
Oh, interesting.
But Jones wasn't the first person to take up production reins on the Madcap Laughs, nor would he be the last. After Parrott left Pink Floyd, I said Parrott. After Barrett left Pink Floyd, their former managers Peter Jenner and Andrew King went with him, believing Barrett to be the sole creative force behind the band.
I think Syd Barrett is like a BoJack Horseman character.
Love it.
Anyway, this was back in April. In May of the next month, Jenner arranged for Barrett to record solo material at Abbey Road Studios in London. Only a small portion of these sessions would actually appear on the Madcap Laughs. The original intent was to tighten up material Barrett had previously recorded in October, but Barrett proved very difficult to work with, frequently ignoring Jenner's direction and never managing to record vocals for the material that was worked on. Recording continued through July until one day Barrett abruptly stopped, breaking up with his girlfriend and checking himself into psychiatric care in Cambridge. Barrett returned in 1969 after having recovered somewhat and attempted to make contact with EMI to get back to work, but was turned down both by Jenner and Pink Floyd's then producer Norman Smith to work on it, leaving it to Malcolm Jones to pick up the project. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kendall Jenner, you can't trust her to produce her album.
No, not that Jenner, Pat.
Again with the time travel.
All right.
We'll talk more about how those sessions went, but let's, for now, what do you say we move on to another track first?
Sure.
All right.
Here's track number 5, this one titled Dark Globe.
Oh, where are you now? Pussy willow that smiled on this leaf. When I was alone, you promised a stone from your heart. My head kissed the ground.
Scrappy. That's how I would describe the arrangements and production on this song. It's a track that, in spite of the disheveled exterior, has real heart to it.
Absolutely.
Particularly in how impassioned Barrett sounds, delivering lyrics filled with disorganized emotion. I get kind of a weird Daniel Johnston vibe from a lot of the tracks on this.
It feels like this kind of had like
This is definitely one of them.
like a bit of a Irish UK folk vibe to it. Like the way it was arranged, where it was not it was in 3/4, but there would be kind of like odd. That was just like 3/4 measures thrown in here and there to make it a bit more disjointed.
Yeah, that was a thing around this time period too. Like that whole there's like a medieval folk like Bert Jansch and like the Pentangle,
The Incredible String Band.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of cutting to the roots of British UK culture in general.
That was in the air at that time.
Yeah, that's in the air tonight.
And at the same time, I feel like it was kind of a predecessor for artists, again, thinking about solo artists who are dealing with different mental health issues. But Nick Drake, Chris Bell, oh God, why is his name escaping me? Tim
Buckley?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. God, you were right there.
Yeah. There's not many singer-songwriters of that era named Tim. Tibby.
Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim.
And we're back at ukuleles. I'm so happy.
If you forgot Tiny Tim's name, like I would actually be a little weirded out.
Big Tim?
Big
Tarantula Tim?
Moderately sized Tim.
Tarantula Tim.
Writing songs about tulips, Christmas, and AIDS.
Oh, man.
But yeah, the very solitary, and it's very interesting, Lils. I really appreciate you having all of this background information about the other players on the album, because I didn't know a lot of that information. I think it's almost it's very helpful to me because it contextualizes the sound on those full band songs.
Right.
There's almost a jazz aspect to it, and as you're saying, they're following Syd. Like Syd's
Right.
going along and in his own world in more ways than one, and they're trying to keep up with his vision, which I'm sure continues to shift as he
Yeah, I mean,
goes.
the Soft Machine very frequently, like, they were a psychedelic band at heart, but they very frequently dabbled into, jazz, like, a lot. So you can really sort of pinpoint that on the ones that they did overdubs on.
Cool.
Prog rock
Thank
in
you.
general is like jazz in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Basically.
Time signature changes.
Just
and-
with more dragons.
Yeah. More
More
drag.
dragons. Yeah, yes, was, considered
And
one
leotards.
of the more seminal prog rock bands. Have a lot of their roots in jazz and actually like funk, kind of like Sly and the Family Stone style funk.
Right. And a lot of those musicians, I mean, are students of jazz.
Yep.
Like a John Bonham, for example. I mean,
for sure.
everybody were top-notch musicians in the music industry at that time, which is different than it is now.
I love
So,
jazz. I did jazz band in high school.
Yeah, me too.
I did jazz band in college.
Hell yeah.
I do community jazz band. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, if that were a thing, I would actually really want to do
I'm a
that.
fan
A bunch of nerds that are like 40 that are just like they were in high school.
No, my wife's been trying to get me to do like a jazz trio or something with her. I'm not confident enough at like bass, drums, or piano to do it.
So let's talk for a second about the Malcolm Jones sessions. After Peter Jenner turned down the opportunity to produce Barrett, the production duties sifted over to Jones, who had some minimal convincing towards his bosses to do to give Barrett a shot. Or another shot, rather. The two met at Barrett's flat beforehand to review Syd's material, and on April 10th, 1969, the sessions began in earnest. The first session was very productive, and it seemed as though Barrett was back on track and in good form, until the second session on April 17th, when Barrett arrived to the studio with a backing band without having told Jones. Thus, the studio was not prepared to record a full band. Nonetheless, the group pressed on, and even though performing backing for Barrett proved to be an ordeal in and of itself, leading to multiple false starts and miscues. The book The Rough Guide to Pink Floyd featured numerous interviews with those who participated in the sessions, attesting to Barrett's difficulty to work with.
Say The Rough Guide to Pink Floyd?
Yep, that's the name of the book.
Written by dogs?
Yes.
Written in dog language?
Yes, written by dog. What if we just did the whole podcast talking like that?
We have to
It
do
would
like
be
multiple versions of the podcast for different people.
Our
dogs.
subscriber count immediately goes down.
Oh, I like that. Like the dog version, the cat version.
Oh, yeah. It's
Anyway, according to Malcolm Jones himself, he remarked it was a case of following him, not playing with him. They were seeing and then playing, so they were always a note behind. While Robert Wyatt of the band Soft Machine, who performed guitar overdubs on the Madcap Laughs, he has said, the musicians would ask, "What key is that in, Syd?" To which Barrett would simply reply, "Yeah," or "That's funny."
That's so good.
I love him.
He's my hero. I love it.
It's so great.
I love it.
Yes.
No, seriously, I have not paid enough attention to this guy. I've always loved Pink Floyd, and have big respect for what I've been aware of in terms of Syd Barrett. But yeah, that's fucking great. I love that attitude. Love that energy. What key is it in? Fuck you.
So how do you guys feel about moving on to track number 6? Or did we have any other comments about this track? Or about the sessions?
I think it's lovely. And it's
Lovely.
I'm just enjoying this to bits. I love it.
All right, let's move on to track number 6. This one titled Here I Go.
Said yeah, here I go. She's kinda cute, don't you know that after a while of seeing her smile, I knew we could make it in style.
So, not a bad track in the slightest, though I do feel like it does show some cracks in Barrett's songwriting abilities and his own production neuroses a little more. Like, as I mentioned, much of the Soft Machine were brought in to overdub the tracks and weren't so much following arrangements as following Barrett's own very frequently directionless playing, and I just feel like it's very apparent on this track. But, you know, they were working with what they had.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun and charming track, but just like for me, like less fun and charming than Love You, which kind of had a similar feel to it.
But like Love You, I can absolutely hear the music hall sort of influences once
for
again.
Sure. Yeah,
All that
it's
sort of
still pretty
bouncing-
fun
with all that
Yeah.
bouncing, sort of romping sort of atmosphere to it.
So wasn't this song was like about he was trying to win a girl back, and like he thought that by like writing a song for her that he could achieve that, but then he ended up falling in love with the girl's sister instead.
Yeah, that's what I took away
Yeah.
from the lyrics.
Interesting,
Really,
interesting take.
Really cheeky bugger, that Syd Barrett.
So cheeky.
Well, and it has that kind of meandering thing. You can sort of imagine the songwriter, someone who would write a song like this, structured, quote unquote structured, in this way, going after a girl and then being like, "Oh, hello," and wandering
it speaks
off.
to his sort of unfocused energy.
It's like George Formby's "Why Don't Women Like Me."
Yeah. While I'm
I mean, he
cleaning
was
and
playing the
windows.
guitar like he was playing a ukulele at that point, like that whole strummy.
Yeah.
By the beach pier in Brighton, you know.
Exactly. I'm
Brighton
into it. I
dude,
really
kid
like it.
guy.
No, not that.
No,
Brighton.
not that. No, not Oak Square, brother. Not that Brighton dude.
Not that. No beers, dude. No beers.
No. Nope, no fucking Carib.
But there's I mean, is it a bit of a reach to sort of almost think of this as being in the spirit of very early punk? Is that weird?
Maybe a little
sort
bit.
of
I mean,
the idea
punk,
of being
punk
like
music did take a lot of influence from this, just because of how completely sort of nihilistic, and it has a very kind of anti-quiet life sort of vibe to it in some places as well.
Let's not take away from the fact that it might not be intentional either because of the mental health issues.
right.
Right.
Exactly. That's something that for Syd was just I don't have a firm grasp of what I'm doing.
Right.
Then, 10 years
Stream of
later,
a-
almost 10 years later, turning into, oh, we don't know what we're doing, and that's great, and we're just going to do it.
Stream of a deranged consciousness.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to listen to.
For sure.
And it opened up a lot of doors for people. I think it kind of helped open up the conversation about mental health in a way.
I mean,
It's
that was the
interesting.
first time that I ever had heard of schizophrenia was
Exactly.
by reading about Syd Barrett. I mean, and that was in the late 80s,
And he's not the only messed up Syd from the 70s, don't forget either.
Oh boy.
That Syd Straw, she was crazy,
Of course, Syd Straw.
Hey, you faked us out. Ooh, why
Why I oughta.
But you knew the Syd who I was talking about. So
Yep.
I don't.
Sidney Pollock.
Sid James.
no, I was talking about
Sidney Poitier?
Sid Vicious.
Sidney
Sid
Poitier.
Vicious.
I was leading up to Sid Vicious, and then I threw a Syd Barrett screwball in there. A Syd Straw screwball in there.
Sid Straw. Okay, yeah, I should have known that.
Sid Caesar.
It's
Sidney Poitier.
Caesar salad.
Sidney Pollock.
Caesar salad.
Caesar salad. Caesar salad is one of my favorite actors of the.
Oh,
of all
Cesar
time.
Salad is actually how you pronounce the
Cesar
name.
salad.
Salada
Really
tea.
go for a Caesar
He was
salad
the
right about now.
he was the head of that punk band, Scissor Slad.
Cesar Salad.
Anchovy paste.
And Joey Paste.
Wah.
Wait. Garlic croutons. Anyway. So I mentioned Robert Wyatt of the Soft Machine performing overdubbing in the last track, and yeah, there were a lot of overdubs that went on. Wyatt, as well as other Soft Machine musicians, Hugh Hopper and Mike Ratledge, were brought in largely to clean up the sounds of Barrett's backing band being unable to follow his direction, only for Barrett to decide to add even more overdubs on top of those overdubs. Things like backwards guitar lines, sound effects, additional additional bass and drums. It has been said that Jones was frequently warned that Barrett should not be left unaccompanied in the EMI studios.
I really wanted you to.
For that reason specifically.
I really wanted you to finish that flub so you could say Drace and Bums.
One incident which caused Malcolm Jones to basically lose complete faith in Barrett occurred during the April 23rd session, where instead of a new track to record, Barrett had expressed an interest in revisiting an old track, Ramadan, which did not appear on the Madcap Laughs. Barrett had brought in a tape recorder of motorbike noises he wanted to layer on top of it, but the sound quality was deemed so terrible that it was decided to source the sounds from EMI's sound library instead.
Sounds like a banger to me.
This process took up an hour's worth of time, only for Barrett to abruptly change his mind and abandon the concept.
Sounds
Love
a lot
it.
like Brian Wilson.
Love the energy.
Yeah.
It wasn't long before Jones' involvement in the project became to an end, with him abandoning his role as producer at the end of May of 1969. At the same time, Barrett made his way out to Ibiza to reconnect with Pink Floyd. He had told his flatmate he was going out for an afternoon drive, and specifically went to David Gilmour to ask for his help with the record. Gilmour had taken an interest in how Barrett's record was coming along, and he, along with Roger Waters, agreed to participate, making them the third set of producers attached to the Madcap Laughs.
Man.
Yeah.
Ibiza.
Ibiza.
Don't you say it like with a like
Ibiza.
Ibiza.
Oh,
Ibiza.
you're trying to be properly Spanish. I was
Yeah.
trying to be like
Ibiza, Barcelona.
like an
I'm
English
going
geezer.
down to Ibiza.
Ibiza in
I
it.
am going to have Ibiza pie.
Oh, man. Just what we need. Mainland Spain hates us now.
Yeah.
There's one place we can't have a live Jukebox Zeros in.
Go Catalonia.
I'm in.
Come join.
There's always the edit function.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, we're sorry, Spain.
Yeah.
If you forgive us, come on the podcast and review Love Beach with us.
I'm just an ignorant
beef.
everyman who
But,
has a Boston Red Sox cap on.
But bring paella. We won't.
Please bring paella.
We won't let you do it if you don't bring us paella.
Yeah.
Guys are making me
We
so
hope you get
hungry.
your independence, Catalonia.
So let's move on. So let's move on to track number 7, the lone single off of the album, titled Octopus.
Even how up, down, to and fro, you have no word. Please leave us here. Close our eyes to the octopus ride.
This is kind of catchy.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
And it's understandable why this one was the only one deemed appropriate to be a single.
I mean, the lyrics are still very, very strange.
Yeah.
Not even entirely sure what this is supposed to be about.
On the last episode, we were complaining that Anthony Kiedis of Red Hot Chili Peppers writes too many surface-level lyrics, and now we got these.
But we're not even talking about an octopus anywhere, are we? Is there even any mention of the 8 legs or looking
You didn't hear the
a bit
thing
like
about
a squid?
You didn't hear the thing about getting ready for the octopus ride,
Oh, shit.
which actually, now that I think of it, could be something unseemly.
I mean, we've all watched hentai, all right?
The song was very slippery and tentacly.
Okay, sure.
It's a song.
And it tasted really good with marinara sauce.
I mean, we're back at paella right now. I'm in. This is a song that I listened to over and over again when I was younger. I really, really love it. It has this wonderful sort of seesaw funfair feel that also feeds into
tying back into the whole whimsy thing.
Exactly, but also very, very sad. This whole like. I don't know, maybe I was reading too much into the lyrics, but I feel like there's a lot there about not trusting where you're at, not knowing, close your eyes, like let go of knowing. And I almost imagine like feeling like your interactions with other people, it's like you're riding on these 8 different arms of the octopus, and where are you exactly and what exactly is going on? It made me feel. I imagined that I felt the way that Syd felt by listening to that song of just feeling a little bit lost and not really knowing where you are.
It's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting perspective. Yeah, I'll have to keep that in mind when I listen to this again.
I don't know how the track listing works. I mean, I feel like these are getting progressively more, I don't know, just
Disjointed?
weird and disjointed. Yeah.
So this song originally started out as a song called Clowns and Jugglers, and it had its start during the Jenner sessions, but was improved upon after Jones took the reins. It's a really good song, and it's really catchy, but yeah, like we've been talking about, it's kind of uncomfortable to listen to if you have the full portrait of Barrett's life.
Right.
Yeah, it's just,
I mean,
it's progressively.
It is, after all, a song painting a picture of Barrett's own fragile mental state and knowing how things eventually went down with that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but when we were talking about how psychedelic and weird and surrealist the lyrics are, I all of a sudden got to thinking of you guys know the old 60s, 70s singer Arthur Brown?
Yeah.
The guy who did Fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that song, and I really like the album it's a part of, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, except for one song. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's a song that's trying very, very hard to capture that psychedelic rock zeitgeist with surrealist lyrics and stuff. And it's so obvious that it's trying to do that because it's a song about all of it. Like all of a sudden there's apples everywhere. That's literally what the song is about. And Arthur Brown is
apples everywhere.
and Arthur Brown is and like
What am I gonna do with all these apples?
Hopefully they're not horse apples.
I mean,
Horse toots.
it's got all these psychedelic arrangements, and Arthur Brown is just doing his whole Arthur Brown thing, just singing like the sudden apple equation sort of thing. And it's just, come on, you're trying way too hard to be a crazy 60s guy, Arthur Brown. Go back to setting your head on fire. That was fun. So, Octopus was a track produced jointly by David Gilmour, who also played a lot on the Madcap Laughs, and Barrett himself after Malcolm Jones had dropped off. Roger Waters was also along to co-produce several tracks. He and Gilmour were in the process of completing Pink Floyd's fourth album, Ummagumma, when they were called up by Barrett, and were up initially against a time limit of 2 days to complete the first batch of recordings. And despite the fact that they had been friends since their school days, Barrett continued to be difficult to record with. Particularly over the course of time, Barrett wouldn't let musicians rehearse or re-record overdubs, insisting that they sounded fine. Reflecting on their time working with Barrett on Madcap Laughs, Gilmour said in a 2003 interview with Record Collector, "Syd was very difficult, and we got that very frustrated feeling. Look, it's your fucking career, mate. Why don't you get your finger out and do something? The guy was in trouble and was a close friend for many years before then, so it was really just the least one could do."
I don't know, not having to come in to do overdubs, like, that's fine with me. Like, just as long as I get the paycheck.
All right. I was thinking the same thing.
And, just take my name off of it.
I mean,
Smithy.
I guess he is the final word on that, so if he says it's fine, then, who are we to quibble?
Yeah, exactly. You were catching me in just that right moment, all right? I believe you. I'm behind you 100%, Syd.
All right. So here's track number 8. We're moving on to that. Track number 8 titled Golden Hair.
Lean out your window, golden hair. I heard you singing in the midnight air.
So I forget which track I said sounded like a dead ringer for Daniel Johnston. This sounds like a dead ringer for Leonard Cohen. Like early 60s Leonard Cohen.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Suzanne and that sort of stuff. Going entirely by the arrangements and not the vocals necessarily.
Like Bowie meets early Cohen.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Suzanne or Who by Fire or one of those tracks where it's just really atmospheric but also really kind of folky. And I kind of dig that.
I like that. I hadn't thought of that before. I always thought of this as like the King Arthur song, where I was imagining, Rapunzel up in her
and that
tower.
was, again, it was in the air at that time. Like people were writing music like that.
They had that sort of like minstrel, not phasing in and out of time thing. Where,
Yeah, what are those stringed instruments
Yes
that
was
look like
doing it
gourds?
at that time too.
Lutes. A lute?
Lute, yes.
Right.
I was
I mean,
imagining a lute player.
Yeah,
one
that's
of those.
that's how Syd Barrett arranged it. If you gave it to someone who was just all in on that sort of thing, like the Incredible String Band, they would have made it sound really stupid, I bet.
Or if like Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull
Like they would have filled it up with all kinds of like
flute.
They would have filled it up with too many like panpipes and trumpets and stuff. And just make it sound like golden hair sort of thing like that.
Oh man. Give it to the polyphonic spree.
I don't like the
Cult
Incredible
rock.
I don't like the Incredible String Band.
I'm enjoying your animosity.
Another band I can think
toward
of
the
is
Incredible
Fairport
String Band.
Convention.
Yes.
They're
Fairport
really
Convention,
dumb.
yeah.
I'm blissfully unaware of the string people.
I listened to one of
The
their
string
albums.
cheese incident.
I listened to one of their albums because I just sort of made it.
Buckethead. I'm just kidding.
I listened to one of their albums a few years back because I made a challenge to myself to listen to every album that was in the book 1001 Albums to Listen to Before You Die.
Oh, right.
And I think that was the one I disliked the most. just because of how up its own ass it sounded.
Great.
Yeah,
They made a song about a minotaur sound really boring.
up his own
do you
ass.
do
It makes
that?
me think of Donovan too. He was writing music like that too at the time.
Oh, poor Donovan, though.
Oh, please.
All right, he was just cute.
He
I
was
don't wanna hurt
buddies
his
with that
feelings.
dipshit, Paul McCartney. I do like a couple of Donovan songs, like Hurdy Gurdy Man, and
I like Atlantis.
that's
I
a.
recognize it's a dumb as hell song, but I still like it.
First there is a mountain, and the mountain then there is
Though
that song.
gods they were.
Drugs.
Yeah. Don't do them.
That's the hashtag for this episode.
Drugs.
Hashtag drugs.
Drugs.
So
Not endorsing or condoning or
No.
or disapproving of them in any
we're
way.
just kind of shaking our heads and sighing.
It's
we're
just
neutral.
a fact of life with regard to Syd Barrett. I mean, it's the acid casualty.
So after many months and having gone through 3 different producers, Syd Barrett's The Madcap Laughs finally completed production by the end of summer of 1969.
Yay!
It was mixed and sequenced through autumn and finally saw a release in January of 1970. Critical response was mostly positive at the time, if incredibly confused, while the crew behind the production of the record reacted rather incredulously. David Gilmour remarked upon release, "Perhaps we were trying to show what Syd was really like, but perhaps we were trying to punish him."
Yeah, that's very
That's just-
tragic to hear.
Ow.
Yeah, harsh words from David Gilmour.
Heavy-handed. Oof.
Malcolm Jones, meanwhile, was harshly critical of portions of the record, singling out the Gilmour's Waters-produced tracks as inferior, remarking, "I felt angry. It's like dirty linen in public and very unnecessary and unkind." These are very strange remarks.
Very impassioned.
I've never heard of anyone compare music to dirty linen.
Dirty undies.
I guess the sense that it's interesting. I guess he felt that the production was too sparse, that they weren't protecting him more, that they were just sort
Maybe.
of letting him be
I mean, I
himself.
They weren't
guess
filling
Or
enough
trying
in.
to teach him a lesson.
I get.
I mean, that's what he literally
they were trying
said.
to punish him.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's horrible. But at the same time, I mean, I love this album. I find things that I really appreciate about each song. So it's just sort of interesting. I hadn't heard those quotes before, and so it's sort of interesting to think of that as something where not only were the members of Pink Floyd who produced them thinking, yeah, we're just letting him fly.
That's an opinion that's coming from like 2 decades of music that you were influenced by after that point. Like
Yeah.
nobody thought that way back then. So
Yeah,
they really
yeah.
thought they were making a fool out of him in a way.
Yeah.
As a punishment.
Right. No, that's absolutely true, because it was almost to the year 2 decades after this album came out is when I first heard it.
Yeah.
And it was filtered through all that time. Excellent point.
Barrett himself expressed something of a mixture of noncommittance and disappointment with Madcap Laughs. As he put it, "It's quite nice, but I'd be surprised if it did anything. If I were to drop dead, I don't think it would stand as my last statement." And I mean, we're talking about all these things that he clearly influenced. So, wrong there, Syd Barrett.
Sorry, Syd.
Great job, Syd. You fucking idiot.
That's where we're at nowadays.
I apologize to the estate of Syd Barrett. Please come on the podcast and review
he can't
Love
even
Beach with us.
He can't even defend himself. He's totally dead.
Yeah.
We should really start keeping track of how many people we've invited on the podcast to review Love Beach.
Oh, it's going to be great. Yeah. I'm just going to set
You
up
think-
like 1,000 mics and let everybody.
I know.
You
what
think
it
there's
is.
going to be enough room in the smell cave for the entire country of Spain?
Yeah, we were going to have the entire country of Spain and I think the state
Of Wisconsin,
of
I think.
Wisconsin. Yes.
To
That's
review
what it was.
Love Beach?
And Michigan. And Michigan, we're going to be
Did you
involved
guys
as
talk
well.
some junk about Wisconsin and Michigan?
I mean,
sure.
probably.
Oh man.
We are
we're
Easterners.
We're not kidding about that paella, Spain.
I mean,
You better
I want
bring the
that
paella.
Yeah, you have to now.
That is a deal breaker.
Yeah, I mean
If you show up at the smell cave and you don't have paella, we will kick you out.
it's a potluck, but we're expecting you to bring paella.
We'll gladly let Fred Durst in, but if you don't have paella, you don't get to come.
I've never been to a potluck where I felt like lucky to eat any of the food that was brought. Like I'm
Also
like, oh,
not-
thank God you brought like Trader Joe's Hispanic pita. Awesome.
We've hosted potluck.
I know, but I was never felt like, oh, I'm so lucky we had this, that you guys brought these cocktail wieners. You know
Sorry,
what I mean?
friends.
We lucked out.
Oh my God! I'm so glad you read a thing on that box on that jar of Heinz that tells you how to make ketchup balls.
I've definitely done that before. I'm not going to go off into a tangent about it, but I've definitely done that before.
I
Ketchup
appreciate us
Jell-O?
talking about ketchup balls right now because you were talking about Love Beach, Love Beach, Love Beach. And I was thinking, I'm embarrassed because I don't know who put out an album called Love Beach. So
Believe it
I
or
recommend
not-
doing this. I just Googled it and the picture came up and there's so much chest hair going on that I'm just,
crap.
Yep.
I'm very happy right now. This is great.
Emerson, Lake, and Palmer at their finest.
Yes.
Wow.
Just having a good old goof
Yeah, I
by
guess-
the beachside.
Our friend Joel Simkis would be mad at you for not knowing that.
Well, he would just tease me. I would just give him something else to tease me
He's
about,
our
which is
fearless
okay.
leader, as you mentioned.
Yep.
We're the
That's right.
co-hosts
On
of
the Town with Mikey D, celebrating 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
very
year.
cool.
Wow.
I should mention real quick that this episode is entirely part of our plan to eventually have everyone who's ever hosted on the Town with Mikey D on the podcast. So we're calling you out, Doug McCormick.
Yeah. How about Sophia Casciolo and Michael J. Epstein?
Come on, Mike Epstein.
I mean, they're all the way in California right now.
I don't care. Come back to Boston to do this.
Just yell really loud from Hollywood or wherever the hell you
Get
guys
the
ended up.
two cans with a
and you
string
know what?
attached.
And you know what? You guys have to bring paella too.
Oh, totally. No cilantro. Fuck you.
I like cilantro.
Tastes like soap today.
Oh man.
And some Roscoe's chicken and waffles while you're at it.
Yeah, I mean they're in the area. Why not?
That's the last thing they would eat because they're like vegan and don't eat any
Yeah.
meat.
And some
animal fries.
and some poquito mas. I've heard that's really good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Taco Bell's amazing out there.
you don't need to bring any In and Out though.
They do have Del Taco.
Yeah, I'm
out there,
sick
too.
of people in In-N-Out Burger. I swear. I'm gonna get an animal style. Like
We deserve it. I'm sorry.
I'm
all in.
I was there. I've been there. I was that guy. I mean, I
We've
could
all.
speak.
I think we're all that guy at some point.
Exactly.
I guess I haven't been to California enough.
Are
But
we
once you turn
inside
40,
an
you're like,
LCD
whatever,
sound
these
system
kids.
song about tacos? Is that happening? I was there. There were tacos.
There's a little there are little Bible quotes on the paper for the French fries and stuff too.
It's on
pretty
it's
interesting.
on the bottom of the soda cups too. I think.
Yeah.
On each and every French fry.
Yeah.
I have an idea for a podcast I eventually want to do about fast food called Let's Eat Trash.
I
love
like
it.
it.
I love it.
Anyway,
In and out.
I approve.
We're now
very
in and out.
socially conscious
We're
to
now
eat
in and
trash.
out of this conversation now.
so anyway, let's get back in to this album with track number 9 titled Long Gone.
And I stood very still by the windowsill, and I wondered for those I love still. I cried in my mind where I stand behind the beauty of the rose in her eyes.
Once again, more Leonard Cohen vibes coming from this one for me.
But there's also a Roger Waters vibe in that one too.
Yeah, a little bit. I think that might actually be David Gilmour on backing vocals right there.
Oh, doing the high harmony there.
Yeah.
But the flow just reminded me of something off of like Dark Side of the Moon. Like, da-na-na-na,
Yeah, I got
da-na-na-na.
maybe like Goodbye Blue Sky or something like that. Or something. And there's like some real palpable sadness behind the vocals as well, which is once again another peek into Barrett's mental state. Like all the emotion has been sopped away from him and he's just like emotionally lethargic and melancholic.
Yes. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. That's a tough song to listen to because I do feel like it exactly as Lils is saying, it does feel devoid of emotion at all. It's not even sort of a heartbreaking sad thing. It's just sort of like, when you're completely drained.
It's and again, there's a progression going on with this record. It's like a disintegration of sanity in a way to me. And this is a mental health statement. This record to me.
Yeah, whether he realized it or not. So there was very little promotion done to promote the Madcap Laughs. Like Octopus was released as a single, but that's really about it. And Barrett himself only ever gave one performance in support of it, which would also become his only solo concert. It was held at the Kensington Olympia Rail Station in 1970, backed by Gilmour and Jerry Shirley. Syd Barrett did 4 songs featuring nearly inaudible vocal performances, and then he abruptly took his guitar off and walked off the stage, confusing everyone in the audience and Gilmour and Shirley.
Power move.
Yeah.
I love it.
Nonetheless, EMI decided that sales were sufficient enough to record a follow-up, the eponymously titled Barrett, which was once again produced by David Gilmour and the addition of Pink Floyd keyboardist Richard Wright. Knowing how unwieldy the Madcap Laugh sessions had gone, Gilmour and Wright made every effort to keep Barrett on track and tighten up the material, regardless of his production decisions, but sessions still ended up running long with lengthy gaps in between recordings due to Gilmour and Wright's obligation to also record Pink Floyd's 1970 record, Atom Heart Mother, during which Barrett would occasionally spy on the band as they recorded. And even in spite of their efforts to rein Barrett in and keep him focused, he remained a difficult presence to work with. Jerry Shirley, who once again played on the record, described it thusly in an interview with The Rough Guide to Pink Floyd. He would never play the same tune twice. Sometimes Syd couldn't play anything that made sense, other times what he'd play was absolute magic. He also described instances of Barrett's direction to session musicians, which consisted of frequently obtuse and obscure instructions like, perhaps we could make the middle darker and maybe the end a little bit middle afternoonish. At the moment, it's too windy and icy.
See that? I hear that. It makes sense to me.
Well, and I think that's I love, and again, it comes back to what you were saying, Jay, about the passage of time, because at this point, if I'm getting together with other musicians and we're talking about how we want something to sound, it's not unusual I feel like every other line that I speak is a line from another song, and I'm not going to sing any of them. Sorry, Morrissey. Sorry, Tom Jones. But it's not
Speaking
unusual
of
for
chest hair.
Yikes.
And I'm happy again. But it's not unusual for people to say, I want it to sound like a broken down church organ. I want it to sound like the middle of the afternoon and the sun's coming through the window. For people who aren't necessarily classically trained or trained in their instrument, for people who are self-taught, talking about music in that way, I feel like now in 2019 is pretty normal.
It's like that famous story about George Clinton and Maggot Brain. How he basically told Eddie Hazel, I need you to play this guitar solo like you just got told your mom died.
Wow. Yeah.
Makes sense.
That is a
Or
fantastic quote.
like I want you to play like the sunset, and then you just kind of pop in like a synthesizer drone and kind of pitch it up and down a little bit. Like, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Richard Wright would also say of working with Barrett again, doing Syd's record was interesting, but extremely difficult. Dave and Roger did the first one, and Dave and myself did the second one. But by then it was just trying to help Syd any way we could, rather than worrying about getting the best guitar sound. You could forget about that. It was just going into the studio and trying to get him to sing at all.
Woof.
Things aren't looking so good for Syd Barrett.
No.
So let's move on to track number 10. This one is titled, She Took a Long Cold Look.
The end of truth that lay out the time spent blazing here on a painting green. A mile and more in a foreign clime to see farther inside of me.
This one's also got kind of a proto-Daniel Johnston feel to it. And I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like it's quite as memorable as some of the other stuff on the album, but it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's not going to be as catchy just because I feel like the meter is a little all over the place. But I kind of liked that aspect to it. And he's explored that a bit on some earlier tracks as well. And probably, yeah, just speaking more to the sort of growing detachment and fraying of his mental state at this point, where he's just sort of riding this stream of consciousness.
Yeah, I just want to point out too, you guys are talking about a connection to punk rock. Like a lot of these songs on these records are like just about 2 minutes long.
Oh, for sure,
pretty much.
So they're definitely just
the
rambling stream of consciousness in like moments in time of his psychosis.
I think the first track is the only one that goes over 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's something about just that abandon, that childlike abandon that he has that's very nihilistic, and you could see where that would transfer to punk rock in some ways.
Yeah, I can see that.
Another way I see it is like he tries, like he gets in there and tries, and it just kind of like and the interest just kind of fades away in the process. You know,
Like
so you're kind of just left with like a stanza of a song.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, I'm done with this song. Let's move on to the next one.
Which is sort of the way Guided by Voices, I think it's essentially the way Guided by Voices operates, in that they have these perfect crystalline ideas. And it's like, well, I've only have a minute and a half of this song. That's fine. Let's record it.
They just want to show as many good ideas as possible.
You might have like a 30-song album.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're all great ideas. And just because a song that you write isn't that 3.5 minute, like, golden length that I think was sort of I think it was probably 3 minutes for a long time and then sort of gradually got a little longer. But this song especially reminds me of the Robin Hitchcock album I, which came out the same year that I started listening to Syd Barrett. Totally unrelated. Robin Hitchcock, recently, I saw him perform in Providence, and he mentioned that he wrote the album, which again is mostly just him and a guitar or him and a piano, at a time where his first marriage was breaking up. And as he put it, I found myself in the rather awkward situation of breaking up with two people at the same time. So thinking about his emotional distress and just paring it down to just the song, just the bare bones, the skeleton of what you're working with, and trying to build yourself back up from there. It's sort of, I feel like songs like that remind me of that emotional state. There are a bunch of albums that I love by different artists, like Leonard Cohen, that are just stripped down to the skeleton, and in some ways that can be even more moving than something that's more fleshed out.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So the second studio album, Barrett, was released in 1970, and despite the frequently cleaner production from Gilmour and Wright, which took the psychedelic folk from Barrett's debut in directions both whimsical and occasionally menacing, it did not attract the critical attention that the Madcap Laughs received, nor the commercial interest, preventing it from charting. Talks were made of putting out new singles and recording a third album, but they were all shot down by Barrett, who was ultimately dissatisfied with the new record, dismissing it thusly. They've got to reach a certain standard, and that's probably reached in Madcap once or twice, and on the other one only just a little, just an echo of that. Neither of them are much more than that. After performing a few short radio appearances, Barrett left London for his hometown of Cambridge, feeling listless and bored.
Cambridge, dude. I can't keep making that joke.
We've been over this.
Yeah. No, I Old Man
No,
Yellow
you cannot. No, you cannot.
Maybe there was like a high level of lead in the water in Cambridge, UK, or something.
I'm putting my foot down, Pat. You cannot keep making this joke.
Christopher was getting wicked pissed because I kept making that Y-O-U-T-U-B-E joke on the last Old Man Yellow Cloud episode. He's like, I'm getting genuinely pissed off right now.
Wow.
Refer yourself to the Angel Dust episode of Old Man Yellow Cloud for further details. Also on the Zero Science Network.
I like to explore childlike abandon and mischief when I can. All right,
Amen.
That's why I identify with this guy.
Amen, brother.
You know what you should have said instead after he got pissed? Just keep going. Have you got it yet?
Have you got it? Yay.
That's funny.
Hey, Chris. Have you got it yet? You got it yet, Chris?
Chris, do you have it? Do you have it?
There's always a little perfectionism in everybody, you know.
Oh, sure.
You know, but I'm the type of person that when you do something like that, you see someone it's the jersey, like, I'm going to keep pushing a little bit.
The little nudge, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I got that in me, too.
Yeah.
It's bad.
That's why I recognized that. I was like, I know where you're coming from.
The nudge in me recognizes and honors the nudge in you.
Some people like to solve problems. I like to create problems for people to solve.
But yeah, people need problem solvers need problems to solve.
Yeah.
It's a service.
Track number 11. Here's track number 11. This one titled Feel.
She misses her crawl, volley grew, heady aside in a dell. Inside an ivy, the lonely one, my bride. How I leave on the waddling wheel they fell.
Once again, a little bit of the Leonard Cohen and maybe just a little bit of Nick Drake as well, I'd say. It's very eerie, made all the more eerie by the occasional fade-ins of like reverb and echo and stuff.
I feel like they did a really beautiful job with, thinking of this from the perspective of the erstwhile friends producing this for Syd. I think they did a beautiful job of the production on what was essentially a fragment, and something that was. he really sounds like Little Boy Lost if you just focus in on what's there and not on the production around it. But the production that they did, I feel like they really gave it that atmospheric feel and made the space around it sort of a cushion for what Syd was able to provide.
Right. It's like, I'm not trying to be funny here, but I guess I always have that sense in me. But it's like finding like that weird guy at Downtown Crossing just playing weird stuff and then putting like a production around him.
Well, it's interesting that you say that.
In order to document
Like-
like
Right.
a stream of consciousness
right.
of life.
Like maybe Gilmore and Waters understood that a little bit better than Malcolm Jones and Peter Jenner did.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of pulling that.
Well, I mean,
together.
that makes a lot of sense considering that they, worked with him for so many years. Pat's back. You didn't hear it, but Pat left for a second. But now he's back.
I did.
I keep forgetting people from other places listen to this podcast, but Downtown Crossing Station is a T station in Boston.
That's true.
Now you need to explain what a T station is.
And a T station is a subway station.
Now our fans in Catalonia know. Thank you.
And a subway is a train system, not the sandwich shop.
Sure.
And Boston had the first in the world.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And what is a world? That's like a globe.
A world could just be my little corner of the world, like Yellow Tango.
That's a Ben and Jerry's flavor, right?
Yeah,
As I understand it.
You
My
can't
little corner of
use
the world.
you can't use the word in the
Dave Matthews
definition.
Band, Ben and Jerry's flavor.
Oh, I saw that in the Ben and Jerry's graveyard when I was there.
Wait, there's a Dave Matthews ice cream,
Does
and,
that-
it's,
does
and
that
it's not
really-
frozen trash shit.
It's not.
I mean, really,
It's
Pat,
not frozen diarrhea.
Based
Yeah.
on what you know about Ben and Jerry's, Pat, does that surprise you in the slightest?
It does not.
There's
no.
a Grateful Dead flavor. There's a fish flavor. Of course, there's a Dave Matthews Band
Ew,
flavor.
I don't want to eat fish.
You guys know about the graveyard though? At the
I
place
do
up in
not know
Vermont?
about the graveyard.
Yeah, there's a
actually.
graveyard with headstones for flavors that they don't make anymore, and that kind of tanked.
That seems kind of mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dave
that's-
Matthews Band was like the first one you see when you
Oh,
walk
that's
in.
like
I mean-
extra mean.
Well, I mean, like, it's mean in the sense it's like, hey, you know that flavor you loved so much? Yeah, we're never bringing it back ever
Yeah.
again. Suck
Yeah.
it.
But I kind of
You're wrong for liking it.
Things you learn about ice cream when you take a goth kid to Ben and Jerry's. Like, there's a graveyard. Let's go look at it. But what you were saying about finding a guy and finding a way to produce it in a way that really honors what he's creating or she's
Yeah.
creating. This idea of outsider art, which is I feel like as
Who's that
time
artist
goes
from
on,
Texas?
You mean Rocky Erickson?
No, there's another one where this guy has like mental health issues, and someone came and recorded him in a small town in Texas.
Oh, you're talking about someone else, and I can't think of who you're
Yeah, I
talking
can't
about.
either.
But
Is that Daniel Johnston?
Maybe.
is he from Texas?
I
thought
don't
he was
remember.
from the
I'm not
Midwest.
sure. I thought he was from some southern state, but I'm not 100%
I'll
sure.
have to take a look. I didn't mean to jump in.
We'll
and
figure that out.
I just got excited and kind of pooped out.
No, I like it. It's good.
I'm just a guest, so no pressure.
But the
Appreciate the energy, though. Thank you.
the idea of outsider art is something that has steadily built. I think about I think it was sometime in the 80s where there was. I grew up in southern New Hampshire. There was a man who was occasionally homeless, who, as I understood it, had schizophrenia. I think it's called something else now. But regardless, there were a couple of artists who worked at the university who befriended him and helped him put out a few books of poetry. And really, it's that honoring the genius and the talent in this man who had
spirit.
mental health struggles and enabling him, giving him the support that he needed
Giving him
in
an
order
outlet.
to exactly and enabled me to read his poetry, which I still have those books.
Jandek is the gentleman's name.
I do not know who that is.
You should check
Jandek.
it out. Yeah,
I think
he's-
you especially, if you haven't heard Jandek, I think you
I mean,
Daniel
it sounds-
Johnston is the
sounds-
first on a list, but Jandek is the gentleman that I was talking about.
yeah.
Sorry,
I
I
mean,
just
it
wanted
really-
to circle back and make sure.
Yeah, no, I
gave the
appreciate that.
facts.
Thank you.
I think that's like a really important lesson that you can take away from that is just the, there's value to everybody in the world in their own ways. And I think, someone who's neurodivergent, you can almost guarantee that they're going to have different perspectives that are, still have value to you. There might be things that you're not that aren't 100% surface level obvious to you, but they strike a very deep chord with you. Yeah, and it's just, I think that's really important to remember, especially listening to this record and the influence that it clearly had.
So at this point in the timeline, things are not going very well for Syd Barrett after his second album. Syd Barrett's final foray into music came in February of 1972, when he briefly formed the band Stars with psychedelic performers John Twink Adler and Jack Monk. The trio gigged around the Cambridge area, primarily at the venues The Dandelion Coffee Bar and The Corn Exchange, at one point performing on a bill with the MC5. These shows varied in quality and were soon subject to much of Barrett's previous depressed behavior, featuring badly tuned, listless performances from Barrett's. One particularly bad show was from their Corn Exchange gigs, one of which Jack Monk related his perspective in the documentary Syd Barrett, Crazy Diamond. Here's what Jack Monk had to say. I remember looking across at Syd just thinking, you don't want to be here, do you? He was kind of like going through the motions. The mic was here, and he'd just sort of be singing gesturing like this, and then he gestured off to one side. And everybody just knew that the wheels had come off. You were just witnessing the breakdown of someone in performance. Some gigs are good and some are bad. Some are really bad, and that was probably the worst. Roy Hollingworth of Melody Maker had happened to be in the crowd for the show in question, and gave the show a very poor review, which hurt Barrett deeply. Wielding the article in his hand, he declared to the band, I don't want to play anymore, and quit Stars, which dissolved not long after. Hollingworth later expressed regret that his review had struck Barrett so hard. As he put it, it was never my intention to harm Syd because I was his biggest fan. He was one of my heroes. I wrote about what I saw and I heard as sensitively as I could, and it was certainly not meant to be a big put down. A little piece of me died that night too, but on a personal level, if it hurt Syd, I'm very sorry. Ideally, I'd have loved it if he made a big comeback and gone on and on. Barrett would eventually perform live one final time during the summer of 1973, performing acoustic jazz guitar with Jack Bruce of Cream during a night of poetry and music organized by the poet and lyricist Pete Brown, who worked with Jack Bruce a lot. At one point during the night, Brown dedicated a poem to Syd Barrett, whom he stated as having started the psychedelic movement in England, at which point Barrett stood up in the crowd and declared, "No, I didn't." Barrett never performed again after that.
Damn. Wow. I didn't realize it was that early on that he basically walked away from music.
And he threw in the towel, yeah.
Yeah, that's a long stretch between then and when he passed in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For such a brilliant mind of someone who clearly had such a talent.
Right. So anyway, let's move on to
This
track.
is a sad episode.
Yeah.
This is
Well, I mean, we can't all be, we can't always just be talking about Dunkaroos and Dungeon Ducks. We gotta
Dungeon Ducks.
sometimes we gotta, face the void a little bit.
That's true. No, that's good. This is a very special episode.
It's a very important episode too because it's underscoring mental health issues.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which means a lot to both myself and Pam.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here.
This is where people go for education on mental health issues.
Yeah.
A doofy music podcast hosted by two failed hipsters.
Failed hipsters.
Yeah, we tried. We really did.
Fail. I think you didn't fail if you're a failed hipster.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That was the working title before we settled on Jukebox Zeros, by the way. Failed hipsters.
Yeah,
you couldn't possibly do better than Jukebox Zeros. Seriously, great name.
All right. So let's move on to, we're starting to reach the end of this point. Here's the penultimate track number 12, titled If It's In You.
Yes, I'm thinking of this. Yes, I am. Paddletown Tom was the underground.
Kind of reminds me of Devender Banhart a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
In that kind of minimalist psych folk kind of way.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on the particular record. Actually, there's a Devender Banhart record that kind of reminds me a lot of this Syd Barrett stuff.
Yeah.
I would have really appreciated a full band version of this song. I feel like there's a strong there's a strong vocal hook happening there, but I think just with only the acoustic guitar backing it, it felt really out of place and a little obnoxious.
Just on the whole, for the most part, apart from a few choice examples, I feel like, as disjointed as they were, I like the full band songs a lot more than the solo songs.
I think that the songs themselves are like, they're pretty strong for someone who's, going through so much and not 100% focused on things. I don't know. Giving this an objective listen, I didn't really get too much of that. I thought it was more adept than I would have expected it to be.
Right. So, after his time in Stars, Barrett began to drift farther and farther away from the music industry and farther from the public in general. He was lured back to Abbey Road Studios to possibly record a new album, but the sessions he contributed to were largely disjointed, mostly consisting of overdubbed blues tracks. It was not long after that he disconnected himself from the music industry for good. He sold the rights of his solo albums back to his record label and lived in a hotel in London, living off of the money that he made during Pink Floyd. Occasionally attempts were made to convince him to produce records for the Damned and the Sex Pistols, but to no avail.
Wow.
That would have been interesting to hear.
Oh, yeah, like God Save the Queen, produced by Syd Barrett.
Syd Barrett produced the Damned album. That would have been something.
Yeah.
Just briefly touching back on that song, it's really interesting to hear you say that you would have liked to have heard a fuller band, because for me, like, lyrically, I love he goes into this almost free association in the next section of the song where he's like, yummy, yum, 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 and he's just enjoying the sounds and the... It's almost like using language as an instrument. Is that a weird thing to say?
Like a Steve Malkmus type of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting way of thinking of it.
Super playful with it. Not even like vocally using his voice as an instrument, but using like the
scat
lyrics,
man.
the words, not like scat man.
Just kidding.
Is that another thing that he's guilty of? Jason Layne, Scatman and Poop.
Again with the scat, though. All roads lead to...
Yeah, so you're saying that the fact that there wasn't a band that he was able to sort of assert his individuality a bit more because it was just him as the vehicle in the song.
Well, and he sort of starts and restarts a couple of times.
Sure.
where he's like, oh, I want to hit this note. Oh, I didn't quite do it. I'm just going to do it again. And I love that they left it in. And I understand what the original producer was saying about, they're airing all of his dirty laundry. They're letting him just fly out there, unprotected. And at the same time, I feel like that freeness is something that we then heard and continue to hear now. Like, you want to have that sense of intimacy with an artist where you hear that false start or the false stop, or you hear the missed note, or you're watching someone perform and they break a string and they figure out a different way of finishing it.
Yeah, this track in particular actually begins with a false start.
It does,
Yeah, where he just goes completely off the note and then just decides, let me try that again.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting sort of peek behind the curtain with that. So here's where it gets really depressing. It's 1975, and if you're familiar with the history of Pink Floyd, you're probably familiar with this story. In 1975, Syd Barrett made one final trip to Abbey Road Studios, where his former bandmates in Pink Floyd were working on the final mix for their song Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a song which just so happened to be a tribute to Barrett. Barrett wandered in unannounced to the sessions and was initially unrecognizable to his former bandmates. He'd shaved off all of his hair, including his eyebrows, and gained a significant amount of weight in the time since they last saw him. Waters, Gilmore, Mason, and Wright were stunned once they realized who the withdrawn man who showed up out of nowhere was, and Waters grew so distressed at Barrett's appearance he fell into tears. At one point, he was asked what he thought of the song they were working on, to which Barrett only responded that it sounded a bit old. The wedding reception for Dave Gilmour's wedding to Ginger Hasselbein took place later that day, which Barrett accompanied the rest of the band to, but left early without saying goodbye. This would be the last time Pink Floyd would ever see their former frontman alive.
Wow, that is really depressing.
Yeah, it gets deep. It gets heavy.
Yeah, I had heard. I thought I had heard something that like the later on in his life, the very appearance of like seeing one of the other members of Pink Floyd would like really trigger him and set him off. I don't know if that's like an exaggerated point.
I don't know if it wasn't listed on the Wikipedia article, which is where I was getting most of my research from.
Yeah. I think that was something I had read on AllMusic at one point, but that was however many years ago.
Right. Anyway, we're finally in like the last stretches of the album, so if you got it in you for one more, how about we get to the final track? This one titled Late Night.
Inside me I feel alone and unreal, and the way you kiss will always be a very special thing to me.
I mean, this song is ostensibly about him missing his girlfriend, but right on down to the lyric, just the repeated chorus line, inside me I feel alone and unreal. It's kind of the perfect summation of just the whole album and on the whole. And it's just so fucking sad to listen to, you know?
Yeah, it's like
because you can feel like the hurt in his voice.
It's like listening to Nirvana in some portions of In Utero.
Yeah,
for sure.
Or Something in the Way.
Yeah, it's like a swan song kind of thing.
Yeah. Even though he went on to record a whole other album and continue to make music, this song, I don't know if the track order was something that Syd decided upon, or if this is something that his erstwhile bandmates decided upon. But closing with this song is just really, it's heartbreaking and it's beautiful, and I feel like it's I think subjectively, I think it's a great song, and it's a terribly sad song and a very personal song. There's none of that sort of jokey, strummy, like no nursery rhyme there. It's just a very earnest.
It's a dirge in many ways.
Yeah. But yes, it's a terribly sad thing. I remember, when I was first learning about Syd Barrett, teenage girl seeing pictures of him back in the day with this mop of hair and, dressed in black and black eyeliner. And I was like, oh, cool. What a cool dude he was. Yeah. And then seeing photographs of him, contemporary photographs of him. And I'm not going to out the name of my old trigonometry teacher, but I was like, he looks like my trigonometry teacher.
Pick that picture of him taking out the garbage in front of his house.
Yeah, which
that surfaces on the internet.
Nothing
all the time.
Against him, nothing against my trigonometry teacher from high school, nothing against anyone, like physical appearance, not to body shame anyone.
Yeah, it just really shatters the illusion.
Exactly, and in a way, I love that you said it that way, because it really humanizes the artist, because there's this image of the artist, and he was probably suffering so much more at that point in time than he was when he was, simply doing his grocery shopping at Sainsbury's.
Well, right. I mean, he wasn't an artist. That artist died. That was a totally different person who had I don't know what his life was like. I mean, I'm sure nobody does. Or what he did with his time. I'm sure he made money off of his royalties, et cetera. But that wasn't the same Syd Barrett.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So in 1978, Syd Barrett ran out of his own money, which caused him to move back to his hometown of Cambridge to live with his mother. He returned to London again in 1982, but only remained for a few weeks before returning to Cambridge to stay. He continued to receive royalties from his work with Pink Floyd via compilations, live recordings, studio albums, and singles which featured his songs. Dave Gilmour would state in a Cambridge Evening News interview, "I made sure the money got to him." So good on Dave Gilmour for that.
Good man.
Absolutely.
Barrett lived the rest of his life in seclusion, reverting to his birth name Roger and avoiding public appearances, attempting to live a quiet life. He avoided contact with the rest of Pink Floyd and did not enjoy being reminded of his former musical career, especially not by occasional paparazzi who would track him down. He took up gardening and abstract painting while for the most part shunning the public. Though Barrett took no further interest in the music industry, he made one final acknowledgement when he autographed copies of photographer Mick Rock's book, Psychedelic Renegades, which also featured several old photos of Barrett. Since he was no longer going by the name Syd, he simply signed the books as Barrett. His health declined over the years of isolation as he developed stomach ulcers and type 2 diabetes, and eventually he passed away on July 7th of 2006 from pancreatic cancer.
Wow. That's a rough one to get,
Yeah. In response to the news, Dave Gilmour put out this statement. "We are very sad to say Roger Keith Barrett, Syd, has passed away. Do find time to play some of Syd's songs and remember him as the madcap genius who made us all smile with his wonderfully eccentric songs about bikes, gnomes, and scarecrows. His career was cut painfully short, yet he touched more people than he could ever know.
God damn. This is a sad episode.
I mean, we got to get that out of our system sometimes.
We all need a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream now and just sit on the couch.
Yeah.
It's as you're talking about Roger's later painting, it reminds me that there was a sale. I think there still is some art of his paintings that he did on like doors and things like that were being sold. I think also via his nephew's website. His nephew Ian Barrett is also a jewelry maker. He has you can find him anywhere under Jurassic Jewelry. He does a lot of
you own
fossil
some of that,
art.
don't you?
I'm wearing the earrings that he made.
Nice.
Made from Fordite, which is layer upon layer of Ford automobile paint.
Oh, that's
that was
so
scraped
cool.
off
I love the way
walls
that's
and then
done. I mean, that's all different colors.
super psychedelic looking.
Yeah.
But he also does work with fossils and amber. I think he's gotten into I can't remember what the real name is, but basically space dust.
Wow.
So like all of this neat stuff and sort of this familial artistic vein continues to run through the Barrett family. And if you're interested in looking at art that Syd later created as Roger, I believe that you can find images of that online, and probably collectors have.
Oh yeah, I was kind
that
of curious
too.
about that actually, if any of that was like visible to the public. And I'm sorry, Ian is his
Nephew.
Nephew,
Yes.
okay.
So, what do you say we get to our final thoughts? That about does it for the album.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to ask whether this is a worst of all time album or not, like we usually do, because that's clearly not what this episode is about.
No.
I'll just say for my final thoughts, though Syd Barrett's music career was short from his time in Pink Floyd through his solo material, it shouldn't be understated what an impact he's had. I mean, his influence has been acknowledged as a major influence on Mark Bolan of T-Rex, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, Brian Eno, and bands as varied as Blur, Tangerine Dream, XTC, and The Damned. His solo material, which had airs of listlessness, nihilism, and hopelessness, helped drive the development of alternative and punk rock. His influence even found its way into Pink Floyd's own post-Barrett material, particularly on Roger Waters, who was deeply affected by Barrett's decline, and it drove him to incorporate themes of mental illness into records like Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall. And I mean, all that just can't be understated, or overstated, rather.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it has to have, to be in like an intimate relationship with someone like that, like, and having to, treat him like a liability. Like, I can't even imagine the sort of conflicting feelings that you go through for the rest of your life.
Or even look back and thought that if I knew more about
Exactly
what he was going through and the guilt that they must have lived with,
I might have been a little more patient.
Right. And the way they treated him disrespectfully by even attempting to make a fool out of him by putting that record together.
And at the same time, in the end, I think they really, even if it wasn't their intention to honor his artistic vision, that's really what they did. Like if their approach was to leave most of this untouched, I think they did a great service to Syd and to music in general. That we're left with what I think is a beautiful album. And although it's a fragmented vision, I think it's a beautiful artistic vision. And I think it earned Syd a position in the. I created this little playlist on Spotify called Syd Barrett Continuum, and I just think of this.
Oh yeah,
arc.
link us to it, and we'll share it on the Jukebox Zeros page.
It's very biased. It's very subjective, but this sort of arc of English, terribly English songwriters from you go all the way back to George Formby and Lonnie Donegan and go through the Kinks, very early David Bowie. You wind up with artists like Blur and Robin Hitchcock.
Yeah. Maybe Pulp.
A little Pulp. We could stick a little Pulp in there, but that really storytelling with a little humor and a little sort of soupçon of depression in there as well.
Yeah, it really, that amalgamation of being jocular and also just depressed. Sounds very, very UK and Ireland to me.
Yeah, there's something about, like, you know, the UK that they do songs about just middle class boredom and listlessness just really, really well.
And as far from a history perspective,
Sorry, grunge.
From a history perspective, it all dates back to World War II and what they went through as a society and the depressed kind of existence after rebuilding and rationing.
Yeah.
And
well, these guys were all born like in the like when the war ended. They were basically the first people of, you know, the babies of the post-war era.
Like, if you don't eat your meat, you're not going to have any pudding.
Right.
For folks who are interested in specifically in that, as Pat and Jay are chatting, I'm thinking about the first few chapters of both Keith Richards and Pete Townshend's autobiographies. They did talk about what it was like being born at roughly the same time as Syd and all of those contemporaries and post-war England. My mother herself, she got out of England as soon as she turned 18 because she was like, this is a grim, dark, gray place in all of the possible ways. So it was
people just slightly older than them were being shipped off to other families that they didn't even know, you know? And God knows what was happening, you know, behind the scenes there. You know what I mean? It's just in their DNA.
All right. So to wrap this all up, Pat, would you say that you have a favorite track from this album?
Yeah, it's tough to pick because I really felt like they were all, you know, at least kind of the same cloth. And like I said, I was going into this pretty objectively and not really knowing much. As I'm pulling up the Wikipedia article, I'm trying to remember the name of the song right now. You can edit this out.
All right, while you're looking that up, Pam, do you have a favorite song from this collection?
Octopus. No, no. I'm actually going to go with "Love You," just because that was it was a very fun song, and yeah, you kind of hit it on the head. It's super charming and jocular, and really kind of speaks to the like the childlike whimsy that he was really trying to go for. And yeah, it was a welcome moment on the record, I guess. Yeah. It was a good example of how it all worked and came together artistically.
Fair enough. Pam, same question.
I'm going to be obstreperous and say that it's a three-way tie. Love You, Octopus, and If It's in You. Those are those are three perfect songs for me.
Yeah, Octopus is great. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, Jason?
I do, and it was Love You because it's kind of a glimpse of what it could have been if all the ducks were in a row.
Yeah.
With him mentally. And what it could have been.
I have a tie between two, one of which is Love You as my favorite. So just to like, you know, balance it out a little bit, I'm going to say No Man's Land. That was my other choice for my favorite. And would you say you have a least favorite off this album, Pat?
Yeah. What was the one that kind of sounded like Love Me, Love You?
She Took a Long Cold Look.
She Took a Long Cold Look. And there wasn't really anything wrong with that song. I think it felt like a less engaging version of the song that I really liked, and I had to pick one.
Do you have a least favorite, Pam?
I do.
Or, I mean, you can always abstain from this.
If I were a better fan, I would abstain, but Long Gone is one that I have to admit I always skipped over.
Do you have a least favorite, Jason?
I can't, just because of the fragility and where he was, I can't say that there's a least favorite because of where it was coming from. I just can't.
I'm going to say my least favorite is actually Here I Go. Yeah, that's where I'm coming from with that.
Well, there you go.
Yep, there I went. And that does it for our episode. Thank you very much for coming on, Pam and Jason Layne.
Wow,
thank you very much.
Yeah, this was a rousing chat. Heck yeah.
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 We actually sounded like real broadcasters for a second.
Yeah, we weren't just joking around. We got into some deep shit. Yeah.
We were real broadcasters for a second tonight.
Talking about depressing things. Yeah. That's what real broadcasters do.
That's right. They don't spend their whole time just drinking beer and talking about Dungeon Ducks.
No, I mean
we're bringing back Dungeon Ducks at some point. I didn't have anything prepared this time.
It's the new Dunkaroos.
It is, yeah.
The continuing conversation about mental health issues is important to me. That was the big excitement I had about being a part of this particular conversation.
I think it's a very important discussion to have, and I know it's probably important to all four of us in this room for sure.
Do you guys have anything that you'd like to plug?
Gosh.
I am playing in a number of different bands right now.
Yeah.
Because I can play a lot of different instruments.
I mentioned Sunken Armada, but why don't you tell them about the band you're currently in?
Sunken Armada is a songwriting vehicle that's a perpetual revolving door of people. It's basically a therapy for me. But I also play guitar in a band called Fifth Business with one John Green, who's
from Nickelbacking.
Also
yes. On the Zero Science Network.
Right.
And that's with Richard Murillo, who was the guitarist for Guillermo Sexo. I don't know if you remember that band or not. I'm also collaborating with Ruben Betsak of Guillermo Sexo on the latest Emerald Comets record that's going to come out.
Oh, wow.
Local musicians like Noel Dorsey and Bo Berenger will be involved in that project. And Ryan Connolly on drums, who's probably my favorite drummer in the Boston music scene. I mean, he's played with Hallelujah the Hills and Guillermo Sexo, and he's just so talented. And I recorded Feminine Aggression, which is my old bandmate Tanya Pearson's project from Northampton, and it's just amazing punk rock. Lo-fi punk rock, and I'm very proud of being able to produce and record that record. And it just goes on and on with me. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
But yeah, cool. I appreciate you mentioning, because that album actually is that Feminine Aggression, their first album, and the title is F/AGG for Feminine Aggression, but also fag, because they're a queer power band. I just made that up. I think it's a thing.
Definitely a queercore.
Yeah, queercore. Thank you. Yes, and then my other favorite album from the past 6 to 12 months is Rules. Rules is a band that has an album out called Pronouns, and it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to check out Feminine Aggression too. Oh wait, I'm not live. That's a thing. They're playing on Sunday.
Memorex.
I'm so used to doing live radio. I apologize for that.
Go back in the past, because this will be out on Wednesday.
You mean like when you're on the Town with Mikey D?
That's right. Thank you very much. Celebrating our 30th anniversary this year on the Town with Mikey D.
And if you're within a 5-mile radius of Tufts University, it's 91.5 WMFO.
And otherwise, it's WMFO.org.
Right.
Right. Very cool. Love that program. Love what you guys do.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
You got anything you want to plug, Pat?
Yeah, just check out the new Smell album, Viva Lasagna.
So
it's on. Oh, thank you. It's on Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, and the rest. And yeah, that's about it. That's all I got going on right at the moment.
I guess all I'll plug is I got a bunch of Sawtooth gigs coming up. Go check that out at the Sawtooth Facebook page I got. That's facebook.com/I am Sawtooth. And if you go on the Sawtooth Bandcamp, you can find my RPM Challenge album, the Endless Elegy soundtrack, disc 1. Maybe there'll be a disc 2 under the name Mithril Edge. It's the soundtrack to a video game which doesn't exist, and people seem to like it. So go check that out.
Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
And that about does it for this episode. Our theme song is Sunny Day by the band Froggy and the Friendship. You can check them out at froggyandthefriendship.bandcamp.com. If you have an album you want to suggest for us to review, or just want to leave us some feedback or a comment, email us at jukeboxzerospodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/jukeboxzerospodcast, or on Twitter at twitter.com/jukeboxzeros. You can find us, rate us, review us, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. And check out our archive main page at Spreaker.com/show/jukebox-zeros. Jukebox Zeros is a production of the Zero Science Network. For more great podcasts, go check out zero-science.com. And that about does it for this episode of Jukebox Zeros. I'm Lils.
I'm Patrick.
And remember,
you know what? I spend about the 10 minutes that it takes for you to do that whole spiel at the end there, and I don't even think of anything interesting to say. Sorry. Good night.
Zero Science.